think failure is what really got me here. So data culture is really about the vibe. And whilst data literacy will make you a master chef, data culture will turn the entire town in a pizza-loving community. COVID was a really eye-opener time. And I think curiosity is what drives the value.
Welcome to our podcast, Data and AI Talks, where we talk about the human aspect in data and AI. I'm your host, 𝗊𝘂𝘁, and today we will talk about data culture. What is it? Why do we need it? And how do you get it in place? To discuss this, we have a very special guest joining us, Viktorija Diestelkamp, and she's the Senior Manager of Business Intelligence at Virgin Atlantic in London. Welcome, Viktorija.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can I just say I'm really impressed with you, and you've been running the BI department at Virgin Atlantic, but you also serve as the CDO, the Chief Data Officer at the International Youth Federation, and above all, you were elected as Woman of the Year 2022 in Women in Tech Excellence. It seems like you're on a great career track. So what else should we know about you?
Well, I'm also a pilot. Absolutely have big, huge passion for planes, and I also jump out planes, so I do skydiving. So that's my secret passion.
Yeah, that sounds like a dangerous hobby.
A little bit.
Nice. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that's I think a very good skill to have when you're in data, jumping out of planes. It's good to let off some steam. So how did you get to where you are today?
I think there's no magic way to success. To start with, I think I did work hard, but so does everyone else, right? Looking back in my career, I think there were a lot of variables in the journey, but one thing that truly remained constant was having a very strong leader I could look up to. Someone who really knew what I was capable of, probably better than I did at that point in time, and supported me in pushing those boundaries. So I think as woman in STEM, I was very fortunate because not only I had a very great female leaders, I had very strong male allies that really helped me throughout the journey.
Yeah, I think that's a very key essence in developing yourself, and might have been luck, but it's also you put yourself in that position eventually, and things will come your way if you work hard for it. You get in the right spot. So great for you. Was there a significant moment in your life that put you on this path to become a manager or to become a spokesman for women in tech?
I think I'll give you a little bit of a cliche answer. I think failure is what really got me here. And probably there wasn't a moment in my life that something happened and it put me on this path. I think it was quite the opposite, to be totally honest with you. There was a moment that took me off the path that I thought I'll be on for the rest of my life. I had a very big dream, and when it suddenly failed, I had to pivot very quickly and really taught me how to adapt when circumstances change. I think one of the things that I think were the best from that experience was being able to challenge myself and really made me think, what is it that makes me so happy? It's not the title, not the industry, not maybe a specific field, but really what are my personal values and how do I want to use it to build my career? And looking back, whilst I was figuring that out, I think there were just hundreds of in-the-moment decisions that led me to where I am now.
It's amazing, because I think a lot of people are struggling with exactly the same. They don't really know what they love or who they are or what they're supposed to do. They just follow a path. And if you don't make conscious decisions, it's also hard to grow as fast as you can and to really hit your potential. I'm just realizing that you are a pilot working at Virgin Atlantic. Is that a requirement for the job there?
No, it's not, but I think it helps. I only fly small planes, private planes, which is amazing. And I think when you work for an airline, you need to have a little bit of passion for aviation industry. I think everyone in my organization loves planes. So I think it's cherry on top.
It's nice. Okay. Well, we met at the World Data Summit in Amsterdam this year, where you were one of the keynote speakers. I really enjoyed the talk that you gave, and you told us the journey you went on with Virgin Atlantic and some of the changes you guys faced. Virgin Atlantic is, of course, a well-known brand, big airline. You guys have undergone a really significant data change in data culture transformation in the past 2 years. Can you share what exactly made this transformation necessary?
I think to start with, we're still going through transformation. We're not on the other side just yet, but I think we hit huge milestones. We've seen great change and positive impact that we managed to achieve. I think for a lot of companies, COVID was a really eye-opener time. We all operated under very extraordinary circumstances where decisions had to be made very quickly, no lead time, and having a very strong data foundation was absolute key. So I think once we got through it, we went from survival to actually growth. We start looking at the more sustainable solutions. There's so much data. By 2030, we're planning to have, I think, around 600 zettabytes of data, which is 10 times more than we have now. And that just makes it so much more complex to drive value from it. There's just too much. We don't know where to start, and it's difficult. I think those challenges would only increase with time. At first, we thought that data literacy will be something that will save us from this pain. However, looking at the solutions that would be more sustainable long term, we realized that data literacy is probably not the way forward. So data culture was my best bet at that point in time. And I think, and maybe for everyone else to understand that data culture is not data literacy or your data governance. Every time I try to explain what data culture is, I try to use pizza example because everyone loves pizza. Think of data as a delicious pizza. Your data literacy is about having the skills to read the menu, to pick your favorite toppings, and go home and make your own pizza. Data literacy is about making you a master chef, really good at what you do. Now, when we talk about data culture, try to imagine a pizzeria. It's really about the vibe of the place. So imagine everyone is having a great time discussing, their favorite toppings, their favorite combinations, having a very healthy, heated debate whether pineapple belongs on the pizza and what happens if we throw banana on it, and even has pizza-themed dance-offs. So data culture is really about the vibe. And whilst data literacy will make you a master chef, data culture will turn the entire town in a pizza-loving community. And that's why we thought that with all the challenges we know that we'll experience moving forward with data, with the size of data, we need to make sure that, we think of pizzeria. We don't think just of pizza.
And so that if you have a data culture, it's not necessary to have data literacy specifically, but you say if you have a good data culture, people will love data and automatically become more literate themselves.
Yes, those two go hand in hand. You definitely need data literacy as your foundation. Having data culture will make people curious about data. They will be more likely to use data in their day-to-day, in their decisions, risks assessments. And I think curiosity is what drives the value. We push the boundaries. And I think that's what's missing fundamentally in a lot of organizations.
I totally agree. I think also a lot of companies struggle with how to get there. So how did you guys initiate the process of changing the data culture within the organization? And were there any specific strategies or frameworks that you found really effective?
For us, our journey was a little bit blind leading the blind. I'm sure if you ask ChatGPT now that we have it, what's the best way to build data culture, will give you a very textbook answer. For us, it was about lessons learned. That's what built our framework. That's what I can share, just the best practices that really worked for us. So I think your absolute first step is defining where you want to be. So defining what your priorities are, what's the good of data culture. So the definition of good will give you almost your vision statement. Now, my one suggestion is do not put all the buzzwords in your vision statement. Usually all the buzzwords will be very conflicting and will be very complex to achieve. Now, once you know where you want to be, now work backwards. Assess where you are, where you currently are. in your data culture journey. So every organization has a data culture. Now, whether it's toxic or healthy, it's a different question. So assessing where you are is about being absolutely brutally honest with yourself and the business, and really writing down the bad and the ugly of your data culture. So, what behaviors do you notice in your organization? And some examples that I'm sure apply to every organization. Do you have people who send maybe sensitive, commercially sensitive or confidential data over email? I think everyone's guilty of that, but no one wants to say it out loud. So it's one of those maybe data culture behaviors that are a little bit toxic. Do you extract the report out of dashboard just to do a little bit of manual manipulation and plug it back into the tool? So all of those things, you need to make sure you write them down and you really face them, face the music, because that will give you a really good action plan. Addressing those key areas will show you the value quicker. Then sit down and have a sandwich. That's the best thing you can do. Now, what I mean by that is think about your approach. It's really not top to bottom or bottom up approach. It's really both. So you really need to make sure when you go on your data culture journey, you have your leadership team, at least few members that are very involved in your roadmap, in your strategy, in your initiatives, and they truly support it. They're very engaged and they are very loud in the organization, supporting you. They send out the comms. They're very visible to the organization. But I also have a very strong community of analysts who are already very good at your data culture. They have those behaviors and they can go out there and champion it. So they'll do half the job for you, but you need to make sure you find them. And probably two best suggestions, the two best advices I can give is, first one is set expectations very early in the game. With the organization. If you have kids and you go on a road trip, they'll sit at the back of your car and they'll keep saying, are we there yet? Mommy, are we there yet? What about now? So set those expectations that this is not project data culture. It's about changing organizational behavior and there's no end to it. You'll see the incrementally value that you drive by making it healthier, but there's no end to it. So in the beginning, probably the effort required to build your data culture will be high, and that it will settle with time, but there's no finished. And make sure that you measure if you move into the right direction, but don't try to move everyone at the same time. Not everyone needs to champion the best behaviors. So 80-20 rule is my favorite in data culture, because what you'll find that somewhere in your business, you have 20% of the people that account for 80% of the bad and the ugly of your data culture. So find them and start with them. And I think that's where the biggest impact will be.
So try to train them, and if not, get rid of them, the unpopular decision.
I think it's a very last resort that I would go to. I think there's a lot about repurposing the skills in organization, but I think there will be some difficult decisions where if someone exposes you to, let's say, the threat of data protection, and you have defined what the good looks like and what the behaviors we champion, someone creates a risk. They probably, if they don't align with your organizational values, including your data culture, I think that's a difficult decision. But I think everyone's fairly on board.
You said so many interesting things. I don't know where to start, but the data culture, do you think there's a big difference between regular company culture and data culture?
No, I think those go hand in hand, truly. I think for us, I would say we had an easy way with data culture because we have very rich company culture. We have a very great startup mentality, which means we pivot very quickly, but also we fail fast and we learn. So that really helps for people to actually change their behaviors as well. It's good to have a look at your organizational culture first and see how those two align, because it could be that you then need to team up quite closely with someone like HR, people team, whatever their name is in your organization, and approach this together to make sure that your overall culture somewhat aligns with the good behaviors you want to drive.
Yeah, I think you also stated this very strongly in your talk in the World Data Summit, that your company values are to fail, and it's okay to fail as long as you don't fail again and again at the same thing, but as long as you learn from it. And now you say start with why you want to do it, where you want to go. That's would you say that data culture and data strategy are also going hand in hand?
100%. I think data strategy maybe doesn't go as much hand in hand with the data culture, but it goes hand in hand with the overall organizational strategy. I think data culture is more about behaviors, but I think it's also very fundamental to success of your data strategy. Because if you have well-defined good expectations and behaviors from our people, they are more likely to fast track and probably help you in delivering your data strategy, because we've seen huge failure rates in our data strategies. And I think people not being generally on board is one of the key factors.
So first of all, if your management, the chiefs are not involved, you might as well not start.
Sadly, yes. I think if you don't have support at the top, you might as well just carry on and save your time and save the effort on something else.
And also, I heard people ask you, how much budget do you need? And I remember your answer. So how much budget did you need to getting this together, getting a good data culture?
The first 12 to 18 months, you do not need money. You don't need to go and get the budget signed off. What you do need is the time and the commitment, which also costs your organization. So it's very indirect investment. I think one of the challenges we had was, how do we get a commitment and the buy-in from, our VP technology, etc., that now will take some of our time that we spend delivering projects, transformations, etc., and we actually will reduce our resource available to support the business, and we'll now focus on, the data culture, the initiatives, building the community, bringing them together. That was difficult, and that is also an investment, not monetary in a moment, but that was an investment. And then it really comes down to organizations, how they want to drive their reward incentives. So changing behaviors, you need to reward people for doing the right thing, for doing things differently. Well, I think we were fairly creative the way we reward people. So, it's anything from vouchers, half day off, a note from our chief technology officer, etc. So there are those personal touches you can do that doesn't cost, any money to organization. However, this is where you need to have the support at the top.
So you can, of course, tell them why it's so important to have data culture, and it's not just another thing that we have to do extra. We're already very busy, but you can also really reward them with things like free time and whatever you can come up with. And it's an interesting approach. Also, you told me in the past, you need to treat your data professionals like either superstars or rock stars. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? I think that's a very important thing.
Yes. When we talk about data culture and generally about data strategies, we've seen a huge mindset shift that is required to deliver on those, to really drive value with data, is when we move from traditional setups where, our people are just very technical. We start putting more emphasis on quite foundational. People call it soft skills. I don't call it soft skills. Foundational skills, communication, stakeholder management, prioritization, conflict resolution, all of those skills that were fairly neglected in the last, I would say, 10 to 5 years. So when we look at developing our people, it's very important to acknowledge that not everyone wants to be the next chief data officer. So that's where we start splitting into rock stars and superstars. So we have rock stars, someone like myself, who was in a very technical roles, but wanted to progress career in management. And, of course, at some point, I would love to be CDO for a huge, global company. That's my aspiration. So my development that was required from my manager, from my company, was very different, right? I needed to make sure that I was a good manager, I was a good leader. My focus was completely different. And then we have superstars who are so much more difficult to develop. And that's why we have high churn rates in our teams, where we push them into management, whilst our superstars, they just want to be the most technical people in the organization. They want to pick up new skills, more advanced, complex skills. They do not want to cross the line into people management. And I think those are very difficult to retain organizations because we have to be very creative in the way we develop them. And, you know, getting them a new certification is not going to do the job. We need to be more outcome focused.
Yeah, and I also think that what you said in the beginning, it's about knowing yourself and knowing where your strength is. Don't care so much what everybody's thinking, that CDO is the highest level for you, because it might not be something you like, and you should be doing something that you really love. And I think it's a great way of approaching it. Also, you have different let's say archetypes in your organization. Can you share something about that?
Oh, there you go. We do have very different roles in our organization. We try to be very creative in the way we assigned roles and responsibilities. I think some people find it very dry. And the challenge we have is when you expect someone in an organization, especially not your direct report, a team that generally sits in a different business area, to suddenly have probably different or additional role responsibilities within their role, it's very difficult to sell it. So you need to be creative in the way you bring your community together. So there are different roles you can assign to them. You can have, Power BI champion, depending, it can be Alteryx champion, wherever you want to be. Someone who generally is absolutely 100% winning in the game of that tool. Everyone needs to go to them and learn from them. Then you have data governance ninjas, someone who are there to make sure that the governance policies and processes are followed. They really instill those behaviors within the organization. So you need to be very creative, because if you just tell someone you're now wearing a data governance hat, there's not much excitement. And I think that's why for leaders, nowadays, it's not enough just to, read a couple of books on how to lead high-performing teams. You need to find the creative side of how do you actually have fun at workplace when you're going through actually quite a big transformation. And personally, I didn't have creative side at all. I'm very technical. I did space engineering. For me, it's all about following processes, doing the math, knowing about physics. It was a challenge to be creative. And I think that's another skill that is really emerging in data leaders.
I think that's great, because it speaks so much more to people than the dry names. If you have a cool name, you can have a data wizard or a data warrior. Lots of people work in IT, love games or love movies. And it just also shows what kind of behavior fits with the archetype. And they know immediately, oh, I'm a warrior, so I need to behave like a warrior. I need to attack this problem face on, or I'm more of a thinker. I need to think more about it, or I need to be undercover like a ninja in the organization and not show myself too much, blow too much, just make sure that things work. Yeah, I think it's a set of behavior rules, and I think that's great. Like that's a very important part probably of the success that you guys are having. Would you agree?
I think I do. I think we really put a lot of thought in the way we deploy the new approaches, the way we build the community. I think it goes back to what we discussed previously. It's very important to realize what your organizational culture is. Virgin Atlantic is the most people-centric organization I have ever been in. Honestly, it's all about the people. So when we talk about the data, we take the data out of conversation. We don't bring our technical jargon into our discussions. We approach people, not as analysts or, data leaders. We approach people and just ask them, how can I help? What problems do you have in your business area? And then when we go back into our teams, then we bring the technical jargon. And it's like, how do we train the model? How do we blend this? What if we switch from A tool to B tool? That's where the technical discussions happens. But we out there in the business, we are just people with a T-shirt saying, how can I help?
Yeah, I think you also have a very informal way of going about with each other. I think that's also great. The people are not afraid to make mistakes. I have so many more questions, but let's just finish with the last one for now. If you need to measure success somehow, you need to have maybe metrics. What kind of metrics did you guys use, or how do you measure success?
I think when it comes to data culture, it's very difficult. because I think everyone seems to be crazy about having numbers to look at to see if you're moving the needle. I think measuring success is important. So the 2 KPIs that we went for, first one was the training completion and onboarding, to really see the engagement of our community, who's engaging more, who's engaging less. That really helps us to understand what personal development plans we need, or maybe really ask why questions, why the engagement is so low in that area. Do we not have their buy-in, or are they simply not ready to become data enabled? Not the entire business doesn't need to be data enabled. High value areas at that point in time need to. Second one was data utilization score. And that's the one that probably is important, not just for data culture, but generally to understand how people use data. Now, one dependency that I think other organizations would have is how mature your data tooling landscape is. Not every tool will allow you to understand if the tools are being currently used. But this is just the first half of the story, how you measure success. When I talk about the difference between the data culture and the data literacy, we talked about the fact that this is really a behavioral change. So how do we track that the behaviors are actually changing organization? You can only observe it. So this is the one where data advocacy, you can't really measure unless you do want a little bit of investment, and you can turn that into KPI. But data advocacy is how, especially leadership team, how are they using their data? Do they champion other teams to use the data? How are they presenting it? How are they communicating in their meetings? I think that's the one where it's quite observational, but also cross-collaboration. So difficult to measure, but it's so powerful. So cross-collaboration, the way we measure is how teams are able to tell a story with their data in the meetings. So I've been to quite a few board meetings where, we have chief finance officer, chief commercial officer, they all bring their own PowerPoint deck with their own KPIs and how their business area is performing, which breaks my heart, I have to say. So they create those silos between the data, and having a high data culture, quite mature, means that you don't have individuals bringing their own stories. They collaborate, and their teams collaborate in a way that when you do go to a board meeting, they present how organization is performing. So they break the silos between the KPIs, and they individually understand how their area contribute to the story rather than bring a story of their own. So I think that's the best indication, but this is where you are fairly there. We are yet to get there, but it's on our roadmap.
So if there are stories like the kids in the backseat, the pizzas, the restaurant, then you're on the right track. Then it's going well. People can relate to your stories, and people are actually understanding what you're saying. So I would like to thank you so much. It was great having you here. Just for the people who are watching this podcast, I would say follow it if you like this podcast, because that will help us so much. For now, thank you, Viktorija. It was lovely speaking with you again. Perhaps we can do another podcast in the future. I always learn so much from you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.